That was awesome. Not gonna lie, I was really excited for Pathfinder Sabbath. I like seeing you guys up here. That was really fun. Yes. And I loved that magic trick, Savannah. Not gonna lie, I've seen you do it like 3 times now, and it's only more impressive every time. So it took me a very long time to figure it out. And in fact, Pastor Jared had to explain it to me, and I felt really dumb when I found out how it worked. And I was like, man, it's just simple counting. That's crazy. But happy Sabbath. This is an amazingly high Sabbath. I'm so excited for the Sabbath. And you know what? We're going to jump right into it this Sabbath. We're going to be spending all of our time today in Proverbs chapter 27. And I like the book of Proverbs. I have like a love-hate relationship with the book of Proverbs because it's literally just a book of little wisdom, like phrases that kind of guide you through life. A lot of it is believed to be written by Solomon, although he can't claim every single one in there. But he did write a lot of these little tiny phrases of wisdom that they're not promises from God, they're not hard rules, but they're kind of ways that you can live your life that kind of better your life. In fact, today we're going to be looking at Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17. And I don't want to get too sidetracked, but all the men in the room, if you want to look at Proverbs 27:16, it might help your home lives a little bit better. We're going to focus on Proverbs 27:17. That's them reading it. Proverbs 27:17 today. And this is what it says. It says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Now, a lot of us have heard this verse before. Heard it over and over and over. My mom used to quote it to me all of the time. I didn't even know where it was found until like a few years ago. I would just recite it. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And I love to ask hard questions about the Bible. Carissa's getting baptized in the next service. And when we were going through our Bible studies, and not just her, but other people I go through Bible studies with, she always would ask this question. When I would ask her a question, she would always have this response. She'd be like, Scotty, why do you ask such hard questions? And I'm like, well, because I really love hard questions. I like to ask hard questions. And so we're going to ask hard questions about this verse. As iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. You know, I was questioning the iron sharpening iron part because I don't really know anything about sharpening iron. And I found out iron is actually not the best way to sharpen iron. In fact, you use something like this. It's called a grindstone. That's what they would use back then. They'd use grindstone a lot. Another one they would use is a welt stone. But an iron sharpening iron was actually kind of a really inefficient way to sharpen a tool. In fact, most of the time it would end up damaging the tool rather than actually getting it sharp. So that made me wonder, why in the world would this proverb say, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another, when instead of iron, everybody would use these, like grindstones or these welt stones is what they were called. And these things weren't made of iron at all. They were made of limestone or some kind of quartz stone. So it had nothing to do with iron at all. So I was wondering, why would this proverb express this? It made me question a little bit. Another question I had was this even relevant to the time period that it was set in? And is it relevant to us today? And I looked into it a little bit, and it turns out the Israelites actually had a really deep connection with this. Because just a little bit before all of this stuff was written, in 1 Samuel, when King Saul and his son Jonathan were in power, they got beaten by the Philistines. There was this big battle. They got beaten. It didn't turn out very well. And because of that, the Philistines decided to do something. They went through all of the camps in Israel, and they removed all of the blacksmiths and all of the blacksmith shops. And they told them, you can't make any kind of tools for yourself. You can't sharpen any kind of tools for yourself. If we find one of these in any of your homes, we'll kill you. You can't do any of it. And their reasoning was, we don't want the Israelites to be able to make swords and spears and fight us. But the consequences were, anytime the Israelites needed to sharpen their tools for carpentry, or anytime they needed a sharp sickle for farming, or anytime they needed a new tool in town, they had to go all the way over to the cities where the Philistines lived and give them their money and have them make them tools. And it was really humiliating. And so King Saul and Jonathan, they got together and they brought all of the children of Israel together, all the men in Israel together, to fight against the Philistines. And only 2 people had a sword, and that was Saul and Jonathan. And everybody else had no weapons because They weren't allowed to do anything with it. So then coming here, it says, as iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. They had a very deep history with how blacksmiths worked. And so they would know iron does not sharpen iron very well. So it made me wonder, okay, what is God saying then? What is he trying to tell me? What is he trying to tell us? Is he saying that people aren't really good tools to sharpen people? And then I started thinking, I think I told you like 2 weeks ago, I have a lot of dumb stories. So I started thinking about all the dumb times that I had these dumb stories, and I was always surrounded by people. And I'm not going to blame it on them, but I'm going to tell you this one dumb story that happened. I went with like-minded individuals, people that I consider friends and that love Jesus and love the Lord and I believed loved me. And then we went camping together. And when we went camping together, I was going through a rough time and I was like, man, this would be nice to go camping. So we went camping and I was loving it. It was great. And I decided that Friday afternoon, I was like, I want to do more than just sit around and roast hot dogs, I want to do more than make some s'mores. Like, I want to go do something. And so I looked around. We camped near a lake. So I was looking around this lake for like a makeshift cliff to jump off of, because I like to jump off of cliffs into water. Not too high, because if I'm afraid of heights, so if it's too high, I won't do it. But if it's just short enough, I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So we found one that looked a little bit like this. It wasn't too high. Now, this is a really nice picture. I couldn't find any of the pictures I had, but it was not this cliff. It was a different one. But the cliff wasn't too high. It was close enough to the water that I wasn't too scared to jump off of. The problem was, at the bottom, it looked really shallow. And so I'm looking there, and all our friends are there, and we're going to sit here on this cliff and watch the sunset. But I want to jump off. And so I asked one of my friends to go down and swim in the little lake down there to check how deep it was. So he runs down there, he swims around, and he stands up where I'm going to jump, and the water reaches right here on him. And I was like, oh, that's way too shallow. And I hear one of my friends behind me, oh, that's deep enough. You can do it, Scotty, jump. And I was like, what? Absolutely not. And they were like, no, you got it. And there was like a group of 10 of us, and all 10 of them were telling me to jump. And I was like, what in the world? And the phrase that my mom would always tell me as a kid came back into my mind. If your friends jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff? And at that time, when I was little, I was like, absolutely I would. And it was funny because one of my friends decided, you know what? It is deep enough. And as everybody was trying to encourage me, he found the courage to jump off this cliff. So he jumps off, and mid-jump, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is a good, bad situation. Bad because he might get hurt. Good because I can see what happens and decide if I want to jump. And so he jumps off, he lands in the water, and he doesn't even go under. Like, he just hits the ground and then kind of fakes it and throws his legs out and acts like he goes under. But you can tell it kind of hurt him a little bit. So he kind of wades out to the deeper part, and he's like, jump in, it's fine. And I'm like, I don't know. You look a little hurt. And he's like, no, I'm okay, as he's grabbing his knee under the water. And I'm like, I don't know, you look a little injured. And so I'm sitting there for 20 minutes deciding whether or not to jump off this cliff. And I'm surrounded by friends that are all encouraging me to jump off. One of those people I'm marrying next month, which is concerning. And so they were telling me, jump off this cliff. And I was nervous. And I decided, you know what? I think the Holy Spirit is telling me not to jump off. So I didn't jump off. They were all disappointed. They were like, Scotty, come on. Why didn't you jump off the cliff? And I decided to walk away from that. Fast forward to today. I know, right? Fast forward to today. The friend that did jump off has now a torn ACL and a torn meniscus. He blew out his knee like a couple months ago. I'm not saying that was the reason, but I'm not going to say it didn't contribute to it. So I was blessed to be impressed by the Holy Spirit not to jump off. But I was surrounded by people, and I don't think I was being encouraged to be very sharp in that moment. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. See, surface level, we all understand what this means. I mean, society understands what this means. People around us have the ability to make us better people. That's why universities require internships and clinical hours for nursing students and other professions. That's why at schools we have teachers who teach the younger generation how to learn, how to grow, how to do math and English. That's why in trade jobs you have mentors that teach you things. That's why in normal jobs you have supervisors that are supposed to be able to teach you things, but don't always. Luckily, I have an amazing supervisor, Pastor Jared, who really does help me learn. I know, right? Brownie points. Brownie points. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We understand this part. But I want to present to you something different. You see, when I thought about this, I'm a visual person, so I would imagine an iron sword being sharpened against a block of iron. And as this blacksmith, right, is sharpening this sword against this iron block, I'm relating it to me as a person being sharpened by somebody else next to me. And I'm thinking to myself, that sword has absolutely no choice whether or not it can be sharpened. That blacksmith decides whether or not that sword is sharp or not. But God doesn't treat us like objects. He gives us free will. He gives us a choice. And we do have the choice to allow ourselves to be sharpened by the people around us, good and bad. I'll explain it like this. You see, in high school, I hiked the Grand Canyon. Well, no, sorry. We went to the Grand Canyon National Park. I didn't hike it, and there's a reason I'll tell you in a second. It's actually kind of funny. But our head dean of the guys' dorm, he got the guys' dorm and the girls' dorm together, and he's like, we're going to go on a trip to the Grand Canyon. And so we go to the Grand Canyon, and he separates us into 3 groups. The first group stays on the rim, the very top of the Grand Canyon. It doesn't go down. They're just chilling out, enjoying life for 8 hours, just chilling on the rim. It kind of seems boring, not going to lie. Then the second group hikes a little ways down, and there was an area, the trail was called Angel Head Trail, I think, and they hike down, and there's a landmark that they can't go past. And the landmark is actually really beautiful. It's like these trees that grow on each side, and the Grand Canyon's pretty barren, so anytime you see trees in Arizona, you rejoice. And there was trees on each side and a river down the middle, and so you could come to this cliff and kind of see it. But you couldn't go past that landmark for the second group. The third group would go all the way to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, all the way to the floor of the Grand Canyon, and would go next to the Colorado River and would chill out there for a little bit and then hike all the way back up. The thing is, the third group had to be screened. So the head dean could say, if you got into that group or if you weren't allowed into that group, because people die in the Grand Canyon every year because they underestimate their abilities, or I guess they overestimate their abilities and underestimate the power of Arizona heat. And so he decides who gets to get into this group. And so there's this one kid, and he tells the dean, Dean, I really want to get in. He's a year younger than me. He's a sophomore. He says, Dean, I really want to hike to the bottom. And we know this kid, and I love this guy, but I don't know if he should have been allowed in the group. And he tells the dean, Dean, I really think I should be able to go in. And I'm sitting there in the office, and I'm like, ooh, let's see what this guy does. And the dean's like, I don't know if you're ready for it. And he says, no, I can do it. I promise you I can do it. And he says, okay, fine, I'll let you in. I was shocked. And you'll see why in a second. He gets the whole group together, that third group, he gets them all together and he tells them, okay, you need this much water. You need to bring this much food. You need to bring these types of food because you can't bring like dry, salty food because it sucks the moisture out of your mouth. And we're going to hike for about this many hours. The general rule is 1 hour down and 2 hours back up. So if you're hiking for 4 hours in, you're coming 8 hours back out. So that's the general rule going into the Grand Canyon. So they have to wake up at 4 a.m. at the campsite and hike all the way down to the base. Now, I chose not to go with them for a very intelligent reason. There was this girl, okay, and I wanted to flirt with her, and she did not feel comfortable going down. She wanted to stay at the rim, the boringest option. And so I was like, all right, fine. I think flirting with this girl is more important. So I stayed at the rim. But this group goes down, and I see them leaving, and I'm like, it'd be cool to go there, but it's all right. I'm flirting with a girl. So they go down. They walk down into the Grand Canyon. They go all the way down, and about halfway down, this guy who pleaded, a year younger than me, a sophomore, who pleaded to get into this group, he starts huffing and puffing, and he's just slowing the whole group down. So the dean goes to him, and he says, hey, where's your water? Why don't you drink some water? And he turns to the dean, and he says, Dean, don't be mad, please. Please don't be mad. I forgot water. Oh my word. The dean was, in the nicest way possible, very frustrated. And he was like, why wouldn't you tell me that you forgot water at 4 a.m. when we left to do this hike? And he's like, because Dean, I thought I could make it. I didn't want to be left out. He's like, we could have gotten you water. He's like, why don't you just share mine or yours with me? And you can't share water. Well, you shouldn't share water when you're hiking in the Grand Canyon, because if one person runs out, and then you give your water and you both run out, well, then there's 2 problems instead of 1. So he tells them, no, you have to turn around and hike all the way back up. So he turns around halfway and hikes all the way back up. And I'm sitting here flirting with this girl, and I see him coming back up super early. And I was like, I knew it. I knew he'd be here early. I called it. And he comes back up the mountain. This is the first year I was going on this trip. The second year, same scenario. We're going to the Grand Canyon. There's 3 groups. And I also choose to stay at the rim this year because I wanted to flirt more with this girl. And then there's a group going halfway down. And then there's a group going all the way to the base. And this same guy, he's a junior now. I'm a senior. He's a junior. And he pleads with the dean. Dean, please let me go. Please let me in. I've learned from my mistakes. I will bring what I need to bring. And the dean says, absolutely not. No way. That's a liability. Like, you were lying to me. What if you lie to me again? You could die. And he's like, no, people don't die in the Grand Canyon. It's fine. And he was pleading with the dean, please let me go in. And the dean finally gave in. He's like, all right, fine. Only if you bring this much water, this much food. And he gives them the whole spiel. And so same thing happens. They wake up at 4. They wake me up this year. I get really angry. I'm not a morning person. So they wake me up at 4, and then they leave to the Grand Canyon. They start hiking down this huge canyon, and the dean sees a water bottle in his hand. So he's like, all right, this kid brought water. He learned from his mistakes. He brought enough water. And he sees that he's sipping from this water bottle very slightly, just small sips. And they get to the halfway point. He checks on everybody. They rest for a second. And he's like, all right, everybody seems to have their water. Everybody's doing good. And they keep going. And then he notices this kid only has 1 water bottle. Like, he's only been drinking very sparingly from this 1 water bottle. And now he's about to be out. So he turns to him, skeptical, as he should be. And he says, hey, where's the rest of your water? And he says, oh, Dean, I have something so much better than water. And he pulls his backpack out, and he unzips his backpack, and he pulls out a can of great value, unsalted beans. And he says, Dean, this is so much better than water, because when you eat it, you get water. And the dean was like, are you kidding me? And he tells him, absolutely not. You turn around and you go right back up the mountain. And they're past the halfway point at this point. He thinks a can of beans is going to save him and 1 water bottle. So he's like so disappointed. He hikes back up, and I'm sitting at the top flirting with this girl. And this is the reason I mention this, is because as I'm flirting with this girl, he's coming back up, and I see him crawling on all 4s as he's coming out of the Grand Canyon. And he gets to the top of the rim, and he just falls, boom, straight on his stomach. And this girl I'm flirting with is extremely kind-hearted and really amazing. So she gets up to go help him, and I hold her back, and I'm like, hold on, this is really interesting. Let's see how this plays out. And she was like, what are you talking about? This is terrible. And I was like, well, we don't know if it's terrible yet. Let's find out. And so and I'm glad I did, because he pulls his backpack around. On his stomach, he unzips it. He pulls out his great value, unsalted black beans. He holds it up. He makes eye contact, and he says, do you have a can opener? Oh my goodness. He hiked down the Grand Canyon, not once, but twice. And the first time, he didn't bring any water. The second time, instead of water, he brings beans with no can opener. And it's funny because you could see dents in the can from when he took a rock and tried breaking it open. And it was kind of funny. But it made me realize something. It brought out this verse in a new perspective. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. It made me think, you could go through life and still be as dull as ever. I mean, we all know some people who just happen to be dull no matter what kind of situation you get into. You see, we are not inanimate objects. Somebody raised their hand. We are not inanimate objects where we're just being sharpened by a block of iron. God is not forcing us to be sharpened. This is something that he tells us that we can live our life by. As iron sharpens iron, we've got to recognize the people around us, good and bad. That's why he uses iron as an analogy. Because each one of us have the same potential for evil as we do for good. Each one of us are born with a sinful nature, and we all fall into sin. And each one of us are given the gift of salvation, and we have the potential to accept Christ's righteousness and live that perfect life he calls us to live. And so he says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The thing is, we've got to reflect to be able to be sharp. We've got to look back on our lives and decide that we want to be sharpened. I've got a friend who goes through life, and he just kind of, as he goes through, he goes through one situation and he's like, I'm done with this, I'm moving on. And he comes into another situation and the same problems arise and he falls short again because he never took time to learn how to deal with them. And he comes into another situation and he's like, I'm done with this. Once he gets through it, it was uncomfortable for me and so I'm done. I'm forgetting about it. And he comes to the next stage of his life and he has the same challenge and he falls short again and again because he doesn't take time to be sharp. You see, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The thing is, we've got to allow ourselves to be sharpened. We've got to spend time with Christ, reflecting over our life, looking at the lessons that he's trying to teach us. Otherwise, we're going to end up going into the Grand Canyon twice with no water, 1 can of beans, and no can opener. We're going to go into life completely unprepared because we didn't take the time to reflect and see what God was trying to teach us. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The people around us can build us up, both bad and good. What makes me angry? Why was I angry? Who was I with? What was I doing? How can I have more patience and avoid that? What makes me happy? Why was I happy? Who was I with? What was I doing? How can I get there again? When was I farthest from God? Why was I like that? Who was I with? What do I need to avoid to make sure I'm never there again? When was I the closest to God? Why was I like that? Who was I with? What was I doing? How can I get back there? These are the questions we've got to ask at each stage of our life. You know, we're coming into a lot of new stages right now. Bowman Hills has about 2 more weeks before their school is over and the summer begins. Pathfinders is ending, so sadly, that this is their last Sabbath here before the summer. The university over at Southern, they're graduating tomorrow. Yeah, so their school year is already over. We've got baptisms going on. We've got graduations going on. We've got programs that are ending. And for the rest of us who don't fit in those categories, half the year is almost over. We've got to take time to reflect before we move on to the next stage. We've got to take time to say, God, where were you trying to get me sharp? Where was I dull? Where can I sharpen my life? What lessons have you taught me? We got to take time to reflect. Otherwise, we're going to end up regretting it. We're going to end up in a Grand Canyon, the biggest canyon that I know of, with no water, a can of beans, and no can opener, thinking that that's going to save us somehow. And we're going to end up falling into the same traps that the devil sets for us every single time. If we don't take time to reflect and let ourselves be sharpened, look around at the people around us, glean from it, take the good, learn from the bad. Don't take the bad. Learn from the bad. Be sharpened so that we don't remain dull. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. But we've got to let the sharpening happen. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this wonderful message. Thank you for sharing with us this little bit of wisdom that we can live our life by in order to succeed. Lord, I pray that as iron sharpens iron, that we can be sharpened by the people around us. I also pray, Lord, that you help us to take time to let ourselves be sharpened, to reflect over the situations that you've put us in, and to grow from the good and the bad. Thank you so much for your love. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.